weapons are ready, kiss the ones goodbye. Now our time is coming, and it is not the time to cry. Fight the war. Fight the war. Fight the war. Oh, who cares why we're fighting? It's about the might. Let the right is righting, settle wrong from right. In the time of conflict, when the bullets fly, in the space of seconds, a life you cannot buy. Face the facts before you, face the simple truth. We're hopelessly outnumbered, it's tragic but it's true. Make your last formation, take the final road. Now it's time for endings, now it's time to go. Fight the war. Oh, fight the war. Fight the war.
I'm fighting the war because that's what I'm doing, because it's a Thursday. Oh yeah, what's going on, everyone? Welcome, Arvanauts, to a very, very special stream. It is May 9th, 2019. I have just gotten done with my first final exam of the semester, just one more final exam to administer, and I am back here, but I'm in a kind of school mood, which I think is very appropriate for what we're about to do today. But before I get to that, I do want to remind everybody about ways to support the stream. If you haven't done so already, please follow the channel. That is always appreciated. Please check out the YouTube with !ArvTube, the Discord with !ArvCord. Please make sure to check out the website for all of this, arvaneleron.com. !Arv tweets will get you over to my Twitter, where you can retweet the stream and let everybody know about what's going on here. !Tweet will let you retweet the stream and tell people about that. Obviously, the way to support us financially is !Arv shop. That is always much appreciated if you're able to support us with merchandise at the moment from Infinity and beyond, but we have other stuff that's going to be coming over there as well in the not too distant future. And also, of course, the Patreon, which is currently sitting at the top left of the screen, you can see at the moment, and that is !ArvTreon for that. And last but certainly not least, of course, we have got the subsystem. We are sitting at 68 subs. We are only 3 subs away from a new record of 71 subs, which would be super, super awesome. Now, before I talk about, before I introduce our very special guest for a new feature tonight, which I'm very excited about. I do want to mention just very quickly the couple of things that people need to know. There will not be a stream tomorrow night, because at least not an official one, because I'm going to be traveling down to Three Rivers Comic Con with little Arv, so my daughter will be with me, and so I will be driving down there, so there will be no stream on Friday night. There will, however, be a stream Saturday at 8 p.m., and I want to announce this and put this in bold and underlined with caps and everything else, and that is that I have a big major announcement that is relating to, it may have some connection to things relating to writing, perhaps, maybe, but that's going to be happening on Saturday night. I am very excited about it. You will not want to miss it. It is Saturday at 8 p.m. We'll have a special stream from Three Rivers with the power of my portable rig, ArvBox 2.0, but it will also have this special big announcement, so you will not want to miss that. Then next week, we will be back here on Tuesday with the game book illustration with Terry Toons. That will be the Sherlock Holmes Murder at the Diogenes Club. And then that evening, we'll be over on GOG with Pen and Pixels, and D&D with GOG Storm King's Thunder. So that's what we've got going on schedule-wise. So very exciting things happening. And again, I do want to remind everybody, ArvCon, the big charity event to benefit the Damon Runyon Cancer Research Foundation, is coming up at the end of the month, May 24th, 25th, and 26th. Very excited about that. More companies have come on board, and it is just looking awesome, folks. It's going to be great. I'm really excited about it. But today, we have got something even more exciting in a way than all of that, because today it is the premiere, I am very happy to say, of a very special event that I've been hoping to be able to do something like this on my channel for a while, and it has finally come to fruition. This is going to be something which is going to happen once a month, and so it is my great pleasure. I hope that this is all done properly. I'm going to transition over. Let's make sure we're ready here. All right. Ha-ha! Great success. Here is the overlay, which has been brought to us by the amazing Kilobyte, who does a bunch of our overlays and things like that. So he did a great job with this. I'm very excited. And it is my great pleasure to introduce someone who should need no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. And that is for the first class that she will be doing on Twitch from the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, which she's been doing for a long time. But this is the first Twitch broadcast of such a thing, and I'm very honored that it is on my channel, that it's being done. And so, Cat, welcome. It is a great pleasure to have you here. I think the folks already know who you are, but do you maybe want to explain how this is going to go, like what you're planning to do for this, and that sort of thing? And also, hi, just in general.
Hi, and it's very odd to be here and not be planning on consulting the Esper Genesis handbook.
True.
And deciding what my character will do. No, you've anticipated my notes. I actually have been spending the last couple weeks thinking about this class, and I actually have rough notes. And the reason, this is the first time that I'm doing this one, so it's going to be a very much a work in progress, very rough drafty, because I wanted to bring you guys something new. One of the things that I know happens with the classes that I've taught a lot is sometimes I feel like I am on autopilot, and I'll find myself saying the same thing over and over again. So it's more of a challenge to come up with new stuff every once in a while.
Awesome. I am honored that it's new stuff that we're having here. So you folks know what's going on for this. Now, we are going to be doing this once a month on this channel. It is going to be Thursday evenings, not necessarily this Thursday evening. We will be working on a different Thursday evening so it doesn't conflict with Emberwind, but we're going to be doing this once a month, and these will be on different subjects. Now, the first 2 months, this month and in June, you folks will be able to participate and ask questions and things like that as time is going on of Kat, who knows a lot about this subject, and so is a person you should be talking to. I mean, not only the president of the Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America, not only with a brand spanking new contract with Tor for 3 books, not only with multiple anthologies, short stories, award nominations, I mean, just novels, just a ton of things. But of course is expert at teaching this stuff as well. So you will have the chance to actually ask questions to Kat as time goes along for this month and next month. Now, starting in July, we're going to change it up a little bit. You will still be able to watch and, enjoy it and so on. But for that particular session each month, the chat room is going to be in sub-only mode, which means that if you want to ask questions, you will need to be a subscriber to this channel. And the reason for that is that what Kat is doing, Kat would normally charge for this because this is, really good high-level stuff. And so this is a great benefit that she's giving to the channel. And so we want to be able to do something which is, also providing a sense of benefit to the community that they can pay into. So basically what it is I want to pay people who do, awesome and important and valuable things. I think it's important to pay creatives of all types. So we want to be able to do something like that. So that's going to be starting in July. So you can think of May and June as kind of your trial period to see whether you're like, wow, this person with all these deals does know what she's talking about. I have no doubt you will come up with that conclusion. So as you're going on, there will be times when Kat will ask, presumably, if you have any questions. But in the meantime, and Kat can correct me if I'm wrong, if you have questions, you can feel free to put them up there. Kat will read chat. I will also be reading chat and checking this out, so you can feel free to do that as well. Other than that, I am going to be largely shut up for most of this thing, because this is going to be Kat's show. In fact, I may even end up turning off my cam for a bit, because I want you folks to focus on her. So it is a great pleasure to have Kat with us. Kat, thank you for doing this. And with no further ado, the stage is yours.
Yay. Okay. Well, yeah, feel free to ask questions in chat and offer feedback. Just be aware, if you guys get too carried away and it starts scrolling wildly, it will be difficult for me to keep track of things. But luckily, hopefully, Greg's eagle eyes will spot any questions and repeat them in that case. But normally with these classes, I do a combination of lecture and discussion and writing exercises. So this is going to be a slightly different shape from that, in that we won't be doing the writing exercises in class, but I will describe them to you and you can jot them down and do them at home in your own time if you like. I will sort of towards the end in the wrap up ask for questions, and I'm willing to stray farther afield at that point and answer questions that don't have to do with the actual class topic, although they do need to be writing related, because advice on life matters. Other than that, take at your own risk. So I am Cat Rambo. I have written about 200 short stories. They've appeared in places like the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, Asimov's, Clark's World. I have been nominated for a Nebula Award and a World Fantasy Award. I have edited some magazines and anthologies. I have a couple of novels out from Wordfire Press, and the latest of which is Hearts of Tibet, which is a story of revolution in fantasy and intelligent beasts and gladiators and stuff, and a book on writing called Moving from Idea to Finished Draft, which basically says that there's lots of forms that ideas can come in, and talks about what each of the forms gives you, and is based on the class that I give by the same name. That's sort of the other hat that I wear, or at least among the many hats that I wear, is I run the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, as you can see above me in this fabulous exobyte. I'm sorry, I'm trying to maneuver my hands so they actually look like they're pointing and failing miserably. The Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, and that's been going for about 10 years. We have live and on-demand classes, and as Arv said, normally I charge, but I will say we also have Plunkett scholarships, which means that in every class there's 3 free scholarships, and the way that you qualify for those is basically it's not something that you could afford otherwise. And by that I mean, it doesn't have to be dire, as in this is my grocery money. It can be just like, I couldn't normally budget for this. Feel free to apply for a scholarship. One of the cool things about the Academy is that we've got other writers coming up, including this weekend, Mary Robinette Coall is doing a class on fashion and world building. Other classes that are coming up are for people who are Pathfinder and Starfinder fans. James Sutter does a class called High Speed World Building for Fiction and Games that's really cool. This will be the second time he's given it. The last time was just absolutely amazing. And then Shannon McGuire is doing another class for the first time on writing series. And if anybody is qualified to talk to you about writing series, it is Shannon. Oh, Arv, who plays those games? Who knows? All right, so as I was telling Arv, I have a bunch of notes, and I have never timed this class. I have never given it before. So I don't think I will slam through all my material within 15 minutes and then leave you empty and bereft and sad. I think this should take about an hour and 15 minutes, and then we'll take another 15 to 30 minutes for questions, depending on how time goes. That's my rough prediction, but there's no knowing, as any of you have taught. No, sometimes a class rushes and sometimes it stretches, and there's no predicting it. So I wanted to talk about immersive world building. And before I do that, I want to talk about sort of the structure of what I'm going to be doing, which is I'm going to be talking about sort of storytelling and what I see as the three prongs of storytelling, one of which is the world building, another of which is character, and the third of which is action or plot. And so we'll focus on world building on this one, and then in the next time we'll talk about character, and then in that third one where we have delivered 2 free slugs and expect you to start paying, we'll talk about plotting. So I hope to convince you that it's worthwhile. So this 3-part structure, I'm not alone in this. A lot of people sort of divide storytelling into such components. And one of the things about storytelling is people like to have rules. People like to have structures. And so there's some basic ones. One of them is what we call Freytag's triangle. And Freytag's triangle is just basically if you had an XY graph where time is this axis and amount of tension in the story is this axis, right, going up and down. Hey, Kilobyte. What would happen is the level of tension in the story would start kind of with some tension, and then it would gradually build and build and build and build until it got to its height, which is usually kind of the point where everything happens. It's the climax. It's the boss fight in video games terms. And then after that comes sort of the wrap up. And it's usually it's this weird sort of triangle that's very long on one side and then much shorter on the other side. So if anybody says Freytag's triangle, that's a highfalutin story structure term that you now understand. Another structure that people often talk about is one where they say, this is how to do a story, is you go try, fail, try, succeed. And Arv has cleverly produced the Freytag's triangle there. And you'll notice that try, fail, try, succeed actually goes in that triangular structure. Because what you want to happen ideally is your character, right, there's a problem, there's a conflict, there's something at risk. And your character tries to solve it and fails. And usually you want that failure to affect what happens next, right? So they try again and they fail, usually creating complications for themselves. And then they try and succeed. And that's where we have our denouement or climax or boss fight, depending on how you want to call it. In looking around at story structures, I also found Orson Scott Card is a kind of interesting tool, the mice structure, where he divides stories into milieu stories, idea stories, character stories, and event stories, and talks about how each of them differ. And his point is that if you start a story as though it were a milieu story, it's got to end as though it were a milieu story. The same with all the others. It's a nifty way to think of kind of like stacking things. The thing about, excuse me, all of this is, right, these are tools, these are rules, these are writing advice, which means that they're not always right. With any piece of writing advice, you should test it against your own practice and see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, okay, that's fine. That's totally fine. Your job as a writer is to try lots of stuff and find the stuff that works for you, and then do that. Find out when you are productive and use that time for your writing, if the writing is the thing you want to be productive about. The thing about structure, what it all boils down to is with a story, something has to change. Usually there is a problem, There is a situation, there is a conflict that must be resolved. But at the heart of things, it's simply that something must change. If it doesn't change, it's just a static moment in time. And the thing about static moments in time is that they don't have anything to pull the reader along in the way that something with a plot does. Somebody who's reading a story is reading to find out what happens next. Somebody who's reading about a static moment in time, what I mean by static is, right, it's just absolutely stock still. You're just sort of circling it with the camera. Is that there is no action. There is nothing to pull you along. Okay. The thing about structure is that it can be predictable. Well, Wrinkle in Time. And actually, if you looked at Wrinkle in Time, you would see that it follows Freytag's triangle, and with the wonderful climax being Meg's confrontation with, God, I don't remember how to say it. Okay, so structures, though. Structures can end up feeling predictable, and you don't want to feel predictable, because if a reader thinks that things are feeling predictable, then they have no reason to keep on going. They're like, I know what's going to happen. Why should I bother? It can end up feeling shallow, because one of the things that has to change in order for a story to really feel interesting is for the character to change over the course of time. Something about the plot, something about the conflict and its resolution ends up moving the character from one state to another. Okay. All of these things, right, they're like training wheels. They are templates, they are design patterns, they are things that you can use or not use as you want to. And one of the things that you need to remember about writing is that it is yours. You get to do whatever you like with it. And in terms of saleability, right, some people are like, oh my God, I can't write what I really want to write because it's not sellable. I will say, of that tour contract that Greg mentioned, it is because I sat down and said, I want to write a story that I'm just having fun with. And that ended up being the sellable book. So, object lesson. All right. Questions about anything that I've said about design patterns or structure or any of this? Not yet. Okay. I like to make sure that people haven't fallen asleep too. It's always good. All right. So when we come to stories, or when we come to longer things like novels or whatever, when we come to fiction, we come to it in search of a particular thing. We come to it usually because we want to get lost in it. We want to open up the first page and get caught by the story and just keep reading and reading and reading, and emerge hours later, dazed and changed and entertained and wondering where the next volume in the series is. Oh, that's an awesome question. Okay, so Kilobyte is asking, what do you do if you have an idea for a story, but you have absolutely no idea what to do with it? So one of this is actually, this talks about all the different, so you give me a reason to hold this up. One of the things is that the different forms that ideas come in give you different stuff. But, and so it could be a title, it could be a character, it could be a particular plot that you want to steal, it could be a world. And I'm wondering if you have a particular idea that you're asking about, in which case tell me how it originates and I will give you more specifics. But one of the things that's really handy is to think about where is the conflict? Where is the problem? If it's a situation, who is the person that it's causing the most trouble for? If it is a world, who is at disadvantage with that world? Who would want to change things? If it is a, like you're stealing somebody else's idea, which I'm going to say is perfectly kosher, and I'm happy to expand on what aspects of that are kosher and what isn't, then you've got it ready made. If you are adapting a story like a fairy tale or a myth, again, you've got the structure. Sometimes one of the best things to do is just to sit down and write your way into it. And we talk about writers as existing on sort of, there's a continuum. There's outliners and there's pantsers. And the pantsers are the people, we talk about, they're writing by the seat of their pants. They are basically sitting down, putting the pen to paper or fingers to keyboard and just going. Oh, awesome. Well, tell me well, actually, I don't want you to give too much away. You have a title and an idea. So I would not worry about how to start it. I would sit down and start writing about what are the problems caused by the idea and who are the characters that might be involved. And I would see how is your title, I would look at how the title and the idea are connected, because there may be a piece of the story that actually talks about the title. But a lot of times the beginning and the end you don't write consecutively, right? You don't sort of start and you like, okay, I'll start and I'll write the beginning and then I will write the end at the very end of it. I mean, it would be ideal. That would be kind of cool. And sometimes you do that. But a lot of times with stories, you're just sort of like, I'm going to start in the middle, or I'm going to start with a random scene, or I'm going to start with something that isn't even a scene in the story. I'm going to start by describing a location where some of the action is taking place. I'm going to start by describing the objects that are in my main character's pockets. You can do all sorts of things to sort of write yourself into a story, to sort of start. And part of the idea behind this is that if you want to be a productive writer, you have to give yourself permission to write crap. You have to focus on the act of writing. You have to focus on the act of putting the words down on paper. And you have to say to yourself, it doesn't matter if they're good words or bad words, because part of the art of being a writer is being able to rewrite the bad words into good words. If you just commit, and this is what I do, right? I commit myself to a certain word count per day. And I may vary that depending on what my schedule is like. But I don't say to myself, it's going to be X number of really great words. I just say it's going to be words. And it may well be that I go out on the front porch and I spend a page describing the way the birds are moving through the bushes. Those are valid words. I am exercising my writing muscle. And part of that may end up going into the story. Yeah. Damon Knight has a really good exercise where he talks about what to do if you're stuck. And he says, go outside and look at the world until you notice something you've never noticed before. And I think that's good advice on a lot of levels. One is that it's very easy to just sort of bang your head against the keyboard until you just feel frustrated and horrible and guilty because you're not writing. And the other is that a lot of times those details will end up making their way into the story, or they may spark a story, or they may just spark your appreciation for, again, the way the birds bounce through the bushes. Okay. So I decided to take as my analogy for the way stories work a savage one, because I wanted to come up with something new. So let me go back to that idea of creating a dream, right? You're creating this dream, you're creating this experience that basically somebody can sit down at the beginning of the horrible cross-country Greyhound bus ride and crack open that book and for at least a while escape the dreariness of the journey. That is what we want. And so the cardinal sin is to remind your reader that they are reading. because every time you do that, you bounce them out of the dream. And it's just like when you are driving along and you take a wrong turn, and the car GPS says in a voice that you cannot help but think sounds annoyed, recalculating. Every time you make your reader recalculate, every time you bounce them out of the story and make them come back in and reorient themselves, you are destroying the immersion and you are destroying the pleasure. Your job as a writer is to never, ever remind the reader that they are reading. Yeah, you can't help but think it's just like, I changed mine to a pleasant New Zealander voice, and that sounds, for some reason, they never sound annoyed. All right, so you're spinning this dream, and you could just describe it, you could think of it in video game terms, right? I'm a big Skyrim player. The dream that you are creating is just basically that that game, that outlook on it, and it may point of view will affect whether you are looking through the eyes of the character or whether you are a la World of Warcraft, perpetually watching their ass as they recede from you. Oh, Gordon Ramsay voice would be fun, but it'd get wearing after a while. So I think that what I'm saying about spinning this dream is that there's three parts of it. One is to capture the reader, which I'm going to say that you do with character. That you pin the reader, which you do with action and plot. And that you transport the reader, which is what you do with your world building, your context. And I like these words because I'm thinking of your readers as being like delicate butterflies with their sensibilities. And readers work, that metaphor works because readers are easily startled, they are distractible, and they frequently notice the wrong thing. If you have ever tried to sneak up on a butterfly, unless you are a lot higher at your stealth skill than I, you know how easily they flutter away. So you're crafting basically little traps for your readers, little jars into which you confine those butterflies. So how do you do that in terms of world building? There's three basic factors. And you'll notice I'm using threes because that is one of the unspoken rules of storytelling, is that things go in threes, and you can examine almost every fairy tale you've ever heard of if you choose to question me on that. One of the things that works beautifully to create a world is sensory detail. And you will remember that we have 5 senses, and you will remember that 2 of those we use a lot for television and for video games, and those are sight and sound. And so sight and sound, if you're only working with sight and sound, you're basically working at that level. You're working at the level of someone watching a window where these things are happening. If you really want to pull the reader in, you need to be working at the level of other senses. Oh God, Tolkien is so wonderful for that. Yes. I'll mention a couple other Tolkien details I was thinking about for one of the other things. But yeah, you get beautiful, concrete details, and you get details like taste and smell, right? And taste and smell are, of course, pretty closely allied. But they are one of the reasons that writers love to write about food, because we know that is incredibly evocative. And food is all about not just taste and smell and color, but texture. And texture hits on the fifth and most important sense, at least to my mind, which is physical stuff. It is touch stuff. And touch stuff is not just about kind of sandpaper rough versus silky smooth. It's about feelings of motion. It's about feelings of temperature. It's about the feeling breeze on your cheek. It's about stepping onto a boat and feeling it wobble underfoot. And one of the things that you are experiencing as I provide these evocative details is hopefully they are evocative enough that mirror neurons are firing in your brain and you're getting a little bit of that sensation. And so to kind of explain what I'm talking about there, let me go back to an article that came out from the New York Times. And if you want to look for it, Arb, it's called something like Your Brain on Reading. And I will hit that for sure once I finish with the sensory stuff. So with your brain on reading, what they did was they looked at your brain first they looked at somebody's brain, not your specific brain, while they were experiencing sensory stuff. And they found that neurons fired all over, right? They were just like all sorts of fireworks and wonderful stuff going off. And the person was experiencing all these sensations. And so then they mapped people's brains while they were reading. And they found that when the writing had sensory detail that was evocative, mirror neurons fired. And so it was as though the reader was living that in their brain. Okay. And what I mean by evocative enough was that it was not enough. Oh, there we go. Arb's provided the link. It wasn't enough to just say the singer had a pleasant voice. It had to be something specific, like the singer had a voice as smooth as velvet. Okay. So that's one of the keys to creating your world, is to remember its physical details and to show your character interacting with those physical details. Feel free to ask questions about that while I go to, I want to go to Game Master Vault's question because this is a good one. So regardless of story, when world building a place, in what order do you create the world, top down versus bottom up? And how do we avoid the rabbit holes we can easily go down when world building? Oh, and my mouse has stopped working. Awesome. So what order do you create the world in? That's going to vary. Honestly, if you're pantsing, sometimes you're building the world as it goes. And what happens is basically as you start to describe it, begins to get clearer and clearer in your head. As you say a house, you are forced to create that house in your head and to know kind of, for example, is it a 1-story? Is it a 2-story? As you make the decision, whether it's 1-story or 2-story, right? Other details, other decisions begin to cascade into place. This is a point where you're very much working with your unconscious mind. This is one, if you're free writing, because your unconscious mind, you'll find, will just be throwing up details like crazy. This is one of the points where you can get into that wonderful flow state. But, okay, so my answer to what order do you create the world? You could start with the world and create a story in it. And particularly if you're a game writer, that may be a very useful way to start. Or you can start with a character and think about what sort of world would produce that character. Or you can start with a conflict and think about what sort of world would produce that problem. You can spend a lot of time thinking about that ahead of time, or you can sit down and just start writing. My theory as far as sort of outlining versus pantsing is that you're going to end up doing the same amount of work. It's that the pantser ends up doing after the story is done, whereas the outliner does a certain amount of it beforehand. Okay. So versus top down versus bottom up, I will say for me the most important thing is knowing some of the economics of the world. Who's holding the power, who's holding the money, what's scarce and what's plentiful. Now, how do we avoid the rabbit holes we can easily go down when world building? Anybody that has ever spent time designing an RPG knows exactly what this is about, right? This is when you're sitting there with the graph paper and you figured out what every little shop along Thimble Lane sells, right? You have done obsessive, wonderful world building, and you cannot put that all in a story, or you will bore people to tears. Feel free to do that up until the point where you are procrastinating, and then stop and just write. But once you get to the writing point, just be aware that no matter how much effort you have put into it ahead of time, only a little bit of that's going to survive. And you're going to have to pick out the most important details. The thing about rabbit holes, as far as like working out the shops on Thimble Lane or whatever, what I would do if I wanted to avoid that getting out of control is I would set a timer. And I would say, I'm going to do this for 30 minutes and then I'm going to stop. And I do try to, as a writer, track my time pretty obsessively. Well, and not obsessively, because I'm not that organized. But I do try to kind of figure out where I'm spending time and use it. And I hope that answered your question, Game Masters. I'm happy to go back. So Dragon's Fear says, I've come to conclude the best path to create a story framework, start mid-act resolution, then organically come up with stories I progress. Would that be viable? Yes, absolutely. Still, even as I write it in first person too, absolutely. Any method for story writing is fine. Excuse me. Any way that you do it, as long as it puts words down on the page, is absolutely fine. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about some writing exercises that you could do to expand your ability with writing sensory details. One of the things that is a fun exercise to do with your writing group is to go in your kitchen and come out with 4 or 5 little baggies, in each of which you have mixed a couple of spices. And then pass them around and have people take a sniff and then do a timed writing where they write for 5 to 10 minutes about how that smells and what memories it evokes. Fran Wilde does a wonderful class for me where she talks about world building in terms of a meal. And she talks about, you think about the ingredients and you think about who's cooking it and you're thinking about how they're cooking it and what is the occasion for the meal, and sort of using the meal itself as a way to fill in the world background. It's really cool. Okay. Hello, One Crit Wonder TV. I love handles. So Stephen King said something good, how he forces himself to write 6 pages a day since he finishes in 3 months. And yes, George GRRMM asked the question and was jealous. I could totally see that. Yeah, Stephen King is one of my role models. I think Stephen King On Writing, which is one of my favorite writing books, says that, in there he says he tries to write 2,000 words a day. And that has always been my goal. I will say the book that I wrote, that again, the one that went to tour, I'm using as an example because it's still sort of surreal that I have this book deal. I wrote that very quickly. I wrote that over the course of 6 weeks, and I did it by writing roughly 5,000 words a day during weekdays. And I was following a kind of very restrictive regimen where I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning, going to the gym, working out, and then coming back and forbidding myself the internet in any way, shape, or form until that 5,000 words was done. So that was super. That was a great way to do it. That's not the only way to do it. Figure out what works for you. And one of the things that sometimes happens with writing advice is that people who have a lot of demands on their times, right? Folks who are raising children or folks who have, an actual job and all of that, is they feel guilty because they're not writing 2,000 words a day or not writing 6 pages a day. And sometimes that's not feasible. One of the things that you need to do as a writer is not beat yourself up and not feel guilty. What I think is really, really important is to set your writing goals and reward yourself when you meet them. Don't punish yourself. I think if you punish yourself, you're just going to end up being miserable and unhappy, at least for me, partially because I end up not enacting the punishment and then I just feel guilty about it. So reward yourself. It is much more important. Aha! Yeah, some people are super organized. I just picked up Kevin J. Anderson's book on writing productivity, which I am looking forward to reading because Kevin is super productive. But again, Kevin has the resources where he can go hike and dictate what he's working on and then send it off to somebody else to transcribe. Whereas someone else, may not have the luxury. They may be doing the transcribing themselves. So, yeah, and some people just, here's the other thing is some people are naturally productive. Some people are not. That's fine. I am lucky in that I am reasonably productive, but I am not by any stretch of the imagination the most productive one in the world. Yeah, they may have invented some sort of time machine. All right. So I talked a little bit about sensory stuff. I talked about that sensory exercise where you basically find smelly stuff. This is where food writing is great. And reading food writing will give you lots of ideas. One of the exercises that I also suggest is take a page of your prose and take 5 colors of highlighter, assign a color to each sense, right? Pink to sight and yellow to sound or whatever format you want, and then go through the page highlighting. And so highlight every time you see a visual detail, highlight every time you see a sound detail, highlight every time you see a taste detail. If you do not have all 5 colors on a page, it may well be that you are writing very sparsely. That is a valid thing. But you might want to go through and see where your world is looking kind of thin because you're not supplying as much information as you could. Okay. I'm going to read you a section. Like here is Queen of the Tearling. This is a book that came out, I think, a year ago or 2 years ago by Erica Johansson. I was going to read a section of it because I think it gives you a good example of how sensory stuff is evoked. So just listen for it. This is chapter 2. Yeah. Kelsey Glynn sat very still, watching the troop approach her homestead. The men rode as a military company with outliers on the corners, all dressed in the gray of the Tearling Royal Guard. The riders' cloaks swayed as they rode, revealing their costly weapons, swords and short knives, all of them of Mortmain steel. One man even had a mace. Kelsey could see the way its spiked head protruding from his shadow. The sullen way they guided their horses towards the cottage made things very clear. They didn't want to be here. Kelsey sat, cloaked and hooded, in the fork of a tree some 30 feet from her door. She was dressed in deep green from her hood down to her pine-colored boots. A sapphire dangled from a pure silver chain around her neck. This jewel had an annoying habit of popping out of Kelsey's shirts minutes after she had tucked it in, which seemed fitting, for today the sapphire was the source of her trouble. Okay, notice all the sense of motion in the verbs, the sway. Notice that you have a lot of physical placement, kind of there's the outliers, where she is in relationship to them, she is 30 feet above ground. All of that is sensory stuff. Pine is a wonderful word because pine has color in it and pine has smell in it and taste a little bit, right? Okay. Okay. So a final sensory exercise that I would give you if you really want to sharpen your skills with this is find some of the books that you love and read the first 3 paragraphs. And again, do this thing where you're looking to see where are they evoking sight? Where are they evoking sound? Where are they evoking motion? And one of the things that you will notice is that there are verbs, wonderful, wonderful verbs that have multiple things in them, right? I mentioned pine has both smell and taste and color, right? The nouns have multiple senses in them. Verbs have multiple senses. Adjectives, spike gives you a sense, a physical sense. Okay. Dragon Sphere is asking, what's my advice for a procrastinator? Has enough ideas and story frameworks in place for 4 books, but hasn't sat down to write it. What structure or book on the process would you suggest? So presumably you want to write a book and not 4 books. So the first thing I would do is I would pick a project. And I would pick the project in terms of, doesn't have to be, you don't have to be like, well, both of these interest me a lot and I have to determine exactly which one interests me more, but pick one that really interests you. And start by describing it in a paragraph, right? What is the story about? And then I don't know, part of it depends. If you're a procrastinator, I would try to commit to writing 100 words a day and see what happens. And just because 100 words a day will let you slowly accrue a substantial amount of words. But quite frankly, what I would do is after you've managed it for a week, I would then reward myself mightily and I would double the goal for the next week. And I would keep doing that until I found what seemed to be a comfortable target for me in terms of word counts per day. I will say the days that I write, I find it easier to write the next day. The days that I don't write, I spend a lot of time wandering the house, feeling guilty, and playing Gordon Ramsay's Restaurant Dash on my iPad. So I'm well versed in the ways of procrastination. Tracking what you do is, I think, one of the best ways to keep yourself accountable. I have a notebook that includes, this is sort of my daily log, and it lets me track what I did. And if I'm forced to write down, spent 45 minutes fucking around with Gordon Ramsay, at least that makes me a little less inclined to do it the next day. Excuse my swearing. I do swear like a fisherman, but Arv told me it is okay to swear. So, all right. Questions? Does that answer? As far as like structure or book on the process, there's a lot of books on how to write novels. Everybody's process differs. And so I would start with a description. I would start by kind of trying to figure out how is it that you can produce words. And I would focus on sort of getting myself used to producing words. And I would not worry about it. I would say, I would not say I'm going to have finished a book by X time. I would say I've gotten in the habit of producing, X number of words each week, whatever. Oh, a book that I would recommend. Stephen King's On Writing is definitely a good one. Here, let me step away for just a second. Sorry, I know it's very interesting to watch my empty study. Anyway, Stephen King's On Writing, first and foremost, just an amazing book. Another book, if you're very sort of Zen New Agey, is Naomi Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones, which is a great book to get you started writing. I'm sorry, I'm not holding it as centered as I could. Another book that I recommend is Dave Farland's $1 Million Outlines. I don't agree with Dave on everything, but I think he's very good about outlines. And this actually got me unstuck at a point where I was stuck. So yay for that. If you want kind of a lot of theory stuff, I think Samuel Delaney's About Writing has a lot of really interesting, good, solid, meaty stuff. And this is a book that I really like. If you like game writing stuff, Beating the Story by Robin Laws has a lot of interesting stuff about kind of how to map out stories in terms of figuring out the story beats. So those are some of the books that I use a great deal. Yeah, I supported the Kickstarter for that. All right. And now I have managed to cover up my notes. So questions about any of that before I move along? What's our timeline? Oh my goodness, I've been going a while. So let me talk a little bit more about sensory, and then I'm going to talk about precision of detail. And then I think we probably will, my voice will be about ready to go out. So we'll move to Q&A at that point. But again, so if you have questions like sensory stuff, one of the things that you want to think about is what are you trying to evoke in terms of mood? Because this is one of the things that you do. Just as a movie creates a certain mood through music and lighting and set design and all of that, words allow you to create a mood and sensory details, right? Description stuff. This is one of the things, one of your major tools in helping to do so. Right. So let's talk a little bit about another way to world build, which is with precision of detail. And usually, the more precise the detail, the more evocative it will be. By which I mean, let's look at it in terms of a continuum where we have on one side, perhaps a drink, a cold drink, a glass of kombucha, a glass of cold kombucha, a glass of cold vanilla oak kombucha, right? A glass of cold Brew Doctor vanilla oak kombucha, right? So we're getting more and more precise as we go along. You don't want, it's like a dial on the stereo. And quite frankly, as with most stereo dials, you do not want to turn it to either extreme unless you are trying for a deliberate effect. So in world building, though, it's usually better. You'll find this is where a lot of that detail that you have created ends up shaping the description. So let's say you have, in the course of your world building, created a world, a country that is roughly based on Holland, medieval Holland. And so you know that there are dikes surrounding the country and keeping back the sea, right? So you need one detail that somehow says this is a country surrounded by dikes that keep back the sea. So you might mention the smell of the sea wind over the dikes. You might mention the distant sight of the dikes. And you don't have to stop and say, as you know, Bob, our country is surrounded by dikes, which have been keeping back the seawater for 250 years, and therefore our community celebrates cooperation, right? You don't need to go into all of that. All of that can be world building that you did in your game masterly way, right? I have done that too. I have kept my wikis that full of obsessive detail, but they do not need to go into the story. The thing that matters, or at least the thing that seems to matter to me, is whether or not you know those details, because that will be a little bit, it's a little bit like an iceberg. You know how an iceberg is 10% above water and the 90% of it is lurking underneath? Your knowledge is lurking underneath the story, but only 10% of those details are making their way into the story itself. You want to think about details in terms of the poetry of them. What things are associated with them? What connotations do they bring? And if you will, pardon me for a second, I will step aside for another story book that would be handy to you in this effort. And it's the Penguin Dictionary of Symbols, which is a really handy book. And sometimes this may be a way that you start a story. I have a story that that just came out in a anthology called Unlocking the Magic, and it's a story called Brittle Are My Bows. Brittle are my bows and broken all my bows and brittle my heart. And one of the ideas that I started with were the ideas of these knights that had basically rose brambles embedded in their flesh as kind of living armor. And so, of course, I pulled out my Penguin Dictionary and I looked up roses and I looked up knights and I looked for things that might spark interesting stuff to stick into the story when I started writing about it. Okay, precision of detail. Okay, so we got through that much faster than I meant to. So if you were working with that, if you wanted to work on that, I think one of the best ways to do it is simply to sit down and do descriptions of things. Write descriptions of things. See how precise you can be. I often copy out passages of other people's writing because it lets me analyze it and lets me really kind of pull it apart and see how it is what they're doing. I find myself doing it more with passages of description than I do with anything else. And that is because description is one of the most complicated things around. It is really difficult to work with because it has a bad tendency to stop a story dead, right? The flow of the action quits. Hey, Frosty Ray. And so basically we talked before, right? That idea that the story is about something changing, something happening, something moving along. And so whenever you've got those moments where we're just sort of circling the object and describing it, that's where the reader may just be like, to go back to the GPS comparison, may decide to hop out of the car of your story. All right. So that brings me to my third part of world building, which is that world building is about information. You're not just describing the world because it's cool. And that's, again, where I think the game master tendency gets away with us sometimes, because we have created this incredibly cool world and we want people to see it. It is the equivalent of somebody sort of backing you in the corner at a party and telling you about whatever it is they're enthusiastic about, usually an enthusiasm you do not share. What you want to show is that world in action. You want to show the character interacting with it. You don't want to spend a lot of time saying that there is a table in the middle of the room. You want to show the table in action with a whole bunch of people clustered around it, plotting, with knives driven into the map in the center of it, marking various forts, right? And talk about precision of detail. What if I say there's a knife marking Fort Monmouth rather than marking a fort, right? The names are precision. They're world building details. And they can have sensory stuff built in. What if I said it was Fort Icefall, right? Okay, so when you are delivering information, when you've got description going on, it's got to be doing something. It's got to be things that it can be doing, and it really should be doing at least a couple of these. One, creating mood, right? Creating the cinematics of things. Two, advancing the plot in some way, giving us information, moving things along. For example, your characters are in the trash compactor on the Death Star, and suddenly we get a description of how the walls are moving closer and disturbing all the garbage, so it smells extra terrible. Description should tell us something about character. It may be describing that character, or it may be description through the point of view of a character. And the way a character describes things, and I'll talk more about this in the section on characters, but the way a character describes things tells you something about that character. Yes, one of my favorite scenes. So for example, I tend to notice plants because I'm a gardener. And so I will sometimes be talking to my husband and I'll be, oh, it's that house with the really nice maple in front. And he'll just be like, I have no idea which one you're talking about. Right. Okay. It can give you a clue or plot reveal or some sort of information that's going to be important later. We talk about Chekhov's gun, which is basically Anton Chekhov, the playwright, said that if there is a gun on the wall in the first act of the play, it must have gone off by the third act. That is one of the expectations. Description is often planting the little Chekhov's guns into the text, usually in a subtle way. Or description can create a special effect. Let's say you are showing your characters entering a disco and you want to show exactly how kind of dizzying and stroboscopic and overwhelming it is. You might spend a paragraph replicating that in text. I think that's a valid thing to do as well. So that's 3 basic techniques of world building. One is by thinking about sensory, kind of what senses are being engaged, trying to make sure that all senses are engaged. 2 is by thinking about precision of detail, drilling down where you can. Not too much, right? You don't want to get too far. And 3rd is using description in basically to create mood, advance plot, reveal things about the character, give us a clue, or create some sort of special effect. Questions about any of that? It's one of the points where if I'm teaching live, I just sort of stare expectantly at people until they come up with something, which I can't really do because you're all 21 of you are anonymous to me, except Prince Justin, who I know is here. Huh? Well, here's one of the things is that with these writing classes, I think often you go away from them and it's not until later when you're trying it out that this stuff clicks for you. And so I will mention that I do have a Rambo Academy Facebook group, and you are welcome to come over there and discuss things. You're welcome to come in and say, hey, you were talking about sensory detail, and I have a question about X and Y. And I welcome your doing that. I think that is useful. I mean, and that's the other thing is the reason I teach these classes is because it makes me think about writing. And here's the trick of writing, which is that if you are writing and thinking about writing, you are getting better. And I would have to be actively thwarting you to impede that process. I would have to be giving you really bad information or suggesting that you really should try uh, Stardew Valley or other incredibly addictive games. But most of the time, if you're writing and thinking about it, you are getting better. I will share. Oh yeah, definitely. And I've got some links that I'll share at the end too. So I'm happy to go to Q&A now. I think I'm at a good stopping point, and I think I've covered everything that I wanted to say as far as kind of the immersive side of world building.
Okay, well, let me jump back in for a second then, as I put myself up there and get rid of the other thing. First of all, this is awesome, as I predicted, and I was I've been retweeting some of this. I actually stole this idea directly
Cool.
from Cat, who does this when other classes are doing it. So I was retweeting it and getting some likes and retweets from other authors and folks like that. That was really neat. I have a couple of questions, but I want Chat to get a chance to do things too. So I'm going to ask a question, and then I want Chat to jump in with other Q&A that they have generally about this stuff as Cat's putting the links up. So I have a question about, and this is something I've been thinking about since, I'm not going to paraphrase it exactly right, but this is the basic idea. So Amanda Palmer was talking about Neil Gaiman and talked about listening to him talk about graphic novels and comic books, and about how the stills in comic books give you the opportunity to represent the passage of time all at once. So you're able to just sort of witness it all at once and see it. So since this has been on my mind of late for reasons I can't talk about, but there's announcements coming, people. But since this has been on my mind of late, I'm curious about what you think about what we can learn in terms of world building things. You mentioned games quite a bit. Are there things that you can pick up from graphic novels? And here's why I ask. Graphic novels are very visual in emphasis, and yet they are, in a way, I guess you could argue that they cover the visual so automatically because of the nature of the medium, that then the rest of the details, it gives them room in a way for the text to handle the other details that exist. So I'm curious if you can learn world building things and tips from the very visual field of the graphic novel, or if is there a danger in it, in that the sort of sight vision of it, the vision of it is so seductive that it takes you away from this other kind of richness of sensory experience that you talked about. So I'm just curious about what you draw from it or don't in terms of world building.
Well, a few things. There is a book that I would recommend highly, which is Understanding Comic Books by Scott McCloud,
Yep.
which is, I think, kind of the classic in the field. I've actually done some writing about comic books academically back a bajillion years ago. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you want to think about, of course, is that there are graphic novelists like Alan Moore who obsessively tell you every detail that's going into a panel versus writers who just basically kind of give you a script. All of these details, right? Because that discarded candy bar wrapper in the gutter can be a world building detail if it's something that tells you something about that world.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, but if you want to kind of, this is a really good question, because I've been thinking about this because I would love to do a graphic novel. And so I've been sort of kind of grappling with how would you go about it?
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit like one of the things I do often with a story is think about what are the big stills, right? What are the big scenes?
Right.
What are the moments where there's just, it would be a big splash page where it would be like a whole page versus, a series of panels.
Right.
And I think, you just as a comic does not go, splash page, splash page, splash page. With world building, you want to have kind of those moments of intense detail, and then you can dial it back, right? It's just every once in a while you can engage in these moments where you see, right, there is all of Asgard and the Rainbow Bridge leading to it, and all of that. And you can take a paragraph and just really pull out all the gee whiz, eyeball kick, wonderful stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was. That's interesting. The idea that there are, because it is these sort of from Thor, you know, the as you said, Asgard, the image of the Watcher, you know, the Heimdall, you know, looking down upon the. God, it's such a tremendous sort of visual image. Or the first time the Star Trek pulls out of space dock in the first Star Trek movie, and people talk a lot about like, oh, that movie was so slow. I'm like, you need to remember that the reason they take like 10 minutes to get it out of space dock is because for a lot of people who were just sort of crying, you know, uncontrollably as they're watching that scene, it's that important to them to kind of get this, sort of lock it, you know, into their mind. But I was curious about that. All right, chat. Well, I gave you a chance to think of things. Throw another question, a world building question, Cat's way, because now is your opportunity to do so. Also, thank you, Rock God, for the resub. I really appreciate that. 14 months. I will have an announcement about the resub stuff and icons and things like that later that I've been furiously, as I've been doing 6,000 things while Cat's been going on, I've been talking about stuff, so I'll have an announcement about that. But yes, throw another question or two, Cat's way, about the world building question. Although I think a lot of it was just like everything you said was just so eminently sensible, Cat, that everyone's just like, wow, we
that's the problem. People get just so stunned by my genius.
They just need to be more. You just need to be less clear and just be more confusing, and you know.
Well, you know, I do think that if you want to think about world building, if you want to focus on world building, and I do think that readers absolutely kilobyte, you can. I think. Sorry, now I've totally lost track of what I was going to say. Remind me of what I was talking about.
So about the idea of if being too being too clear and too definitive and too easy for stuff to pick up, and then you said, I assume you're going to talk about if readers feel something.
Well, that's it. If readers feel like you are leading them by the nose, then they're just not going to be happy with it.
Yeah.
And when we talk about stuff, you know, feeling preachy or obvious, that's people just want stories. Mm-hmm. They don't want the other crap.
I have a question about that. When do you know that a particular world building detail hasn't landed, that it is too far down the rabbit hole, or it is too precious, or it is too subtle, or I suppose, or the opposite, or it is too obvious? Like, how do you know that it doesn't hit? I mean, I guess the beta readers and other folks will tell you, but I'm curious if there's a moment where you're reading it back and you think, this isn't really, it sounded better when I was first conceptualizing this, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't really work the way I intended it to.
A good rule of thumb is the more amount of time you spend describing something, the more important should be to the story. Okay. And it's a little bit like every dungeon master knows the trick of when you go into a room of describing the surroundings in such a way that it freaks your players out, right? You know, and you can be like, and there's a bookcase in the corner and it's got a kind of malevolent hunch, and there's something like, oh, fuck, animate furniture, you know.
Yep, so. Exactly. Well, like, and that is a variant on the Chekhov's gun thing, you know, like as you said, like the more you describe a particular, you know, item, the more people are like, why are you spending all this time?
Why are you telling us this?
And it is pretty funny sometimes when it's nothing. You're just like, oh, a cigar is just a cigar. I don't know what your problem is. It's
well, and we did have at one point the players in the game I had run had just had an awful encounter with an animate table that just kicked their asses. I don't know if any of them are watching this, but I mean, and seriously, and then for like 3 sessions after that, all I had to do was start listing the furniture in the room, and they were flinching.
What does this mean?
What does that mean?
So I think Prince Justin has got one.
That's it. He's got a question about this is what do they call it? The smurp question. Will you look up Turkey City Lexicon? Because that's got full of useful terms, including the smurp problem. Mm-hmm. I should do so how do I feel about using or not using common words for something analogous or not quite the Earth equivalent? I think that is a question that has to do with the level of precision of detail. And if you are over here in the kind of more abstract, then yeah, rabbit is okay. But if you're trying to create a very precise, clear, crystal clear world, then smear. has to be there, and you must also establish what is different about the Smurfs from rabbits, if that makes sense. I mean, and that's like, you've got a fantasy world and you're kind of like, well, they have blueberries and they have blueberry pie, and do I really want that?
Okay, there's the link to Science Fiction Workshop.
There you go.
1996, which is, and SIFWA also has a page on this too, of course.
Yeah.
So.
And like the history stuff is not important. The history stuff is the usual kind of science fiction writers going to, oh, science fiction writers are important. Here's our history. And the fun part is the lexicon, which is full of great words for things and great stuff that you can use with your writing workshop.
Yep.
Including what is it, like the world is a jar of Tang, or as you know, Bob, and all of that.
Mm-hmm. The as you know, Bob is great. I also I want to ask one other one, and then we'll let anything else from chat come through. Because you mentioned the idea of sometimes it may just be a matter of writing sparsely, and I was thinking about that champion of sparse writing, Hemingway, who sometimes goes out of his way to, pull anything, descriptive from his work, so that you're literally just looking at, it's a very just the facts style, which is there's that line from Old Man and the Sea, which is, he took all his pride and all his weight and put it against the line. And it's all very much like, how do you, what? Like it was very sort of, the whole book in a way is metaphorical, but not his language. Yeah. So, and a lot of people talk about, I really want to imitate Hemingway, but I think it's very difficult to do Hemingway the way Hemingway does Hemingway. So I guess, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So you hit on one of my favorite stories, actually, and I actually have a short story that's a tribute to The Old Man and the Sea, because I just freaking love that story.
Yeah.
But if you go and look at the prose, and one of the things that's interesting about Hemingway is that people may or may not know Gertrude Stein. They were expats together in Paris, right. And so he went to Stein for writing advice, and Stein read his manuscript and said, okay, cut it by 50%. And he did so and brought it back, and she read it again and was like, cut it by another, significant percentage, and just basically taught him to strip away stuff.
Yep.
If you look at Hemingway prose, there's still sensory stuff in there.
Oh, yeah.
It is beautifully inlaid, and you will notice that every time there is a sensory detail, it is doing multiple things. So yeah, you can write like Hemingway, but you got to be, it's not a matter of just using simple sentences. You have to use simple sentences to create a beautiful effect.
Yep. And it's interesting because he's often put up against someone like Faulkner, who writes in, again, Southern Gothic, very florid type of style. But in a way, I agree with you. The same amount of details are really being put through, but are deployed much differently. Where, not unlike the region that he's writing about, everything with Faulkner is ornamental. And I don't mean in that bad way, but I mean, it's just, it's very... Yeah. It feels very Southern matronly, walking down the stairs with extra flowers on the hat, and as opposed to someone like Hemingway who conceals that much better. So
you've also got like Faulkner's full of kind of like claustrophobic ghost stories, whereas Hemingway's out on the boat wrestling with tuna.
Exactly. Fighting in the bullfight ring and all that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love Papa Hemingway. I know he was a jerk in many ways, but he's one of my...
but yeah, it's interesting to sort of see those combinations. All right, chat. Well, last chance if you want to throw a question this way, but I really do think that's it. I think a lot of it is just people being like, that's really helpful, thank you, and they're like furiously writing it down. So I think that's what a lot of it is.
Come over to the Facebook group. Feel free if you're interested. Actually, I've just mentioned Mary Robinette's Coal's workshop is this weekend, and there are just a couple slots left in it. Unfortunately, I don't have any more free scholarship slots left, but there is room for other folks. There are Plunkett scholarships left in a lot of the other stuff, but do check out the live classes because they're a lot of fun and I enjoy them.
And you'll be able to get more of this. And as a reminder for folks, this is only the first of these. We will be doing another one of these next month. Actually, do you have a topic for next month? Did you say
yes.
You're doing what?
So next time we'll be talking about creating an immersive story with characters.
One of my
And again,
favorites.
I have a three-pronged approach.
Outstanding. I love it. One of my favorites. Characters near and dear to my heart. So we'll be talking about character next month, and that will be the last of these so-called free ones. Now, after that, you'll still be able to watch this. It's never going to be like available only to one. You'll still be able to watch it, but if you want to actually ask questions, this will be in sub-only mode for questions during that time. So this is kind of a try before you buy in terms of that question. Although Dragon Spear does have one. I'll let you take that.
One of the best stories having their central theme of conflict where each side's goal brings them in conflict with one another or oneself too. Which version of that is best? One's goal is a counter, see versus destroy. I think so. To kind of come at the question that you're asking in a different way, you want your main character, your protagonist, to have something that they want to do, and then you want your antagonist, who's the person who's sort of whose job in the story is to get in the way of the protagonist, to be doing that, getting in the way, not because they're like, oh, I'm an evil overlord, or oh, I really hate this antagonist, but because what they want is at odds with what the protagonist wants. And one of my favorite books is a series by Daniel Abraham called The Dagger in the Path. It's a fantasy series. It is 5 books. They're all out now, so you thank God. But it is one of the reasons I love it is one of the protagonists is a banker, which I just think is so cool. There's not many bankers in fantasy fiction. But the bad guy in that is a character who you know from the very beginning, who you like from the very beginning, who you understand from the very beginning, and who, when he does something absolutely appalling that sets him off from the rest of humanity, you understand and feel some amount of sympathy for what it is that he's doing and why he thinks it is the only possible course of action. Maybe they want the same thing, or maybe like one guy wants to reclaim the throne, but the other guy wants to destroy the throne. They don't have to be the same thing. And actually, I think they're going to be more interesting if they're not, like here are two people both sort of in challenge for the same thing, but more like they are getting in each other's way because they are at odds. What they want is so at odds. Does that make sense?
I think it does.
Okay.
Cool. Yes. Yeah, I should point out, of course, that, and I'm sure Kat will talk about something similar to this next month, that remember, Game Masters, that one of the reasons sometimes that authors enjoy their villains, I shouldn't say more than their heroes, but the reason they enjoy writing villains is that villains are often disrupting the status quo. They're often the more dynamic force. And so, if, especially in fantasy, if heroes are trying to restore an established order, and this is very much dependent, of course, on the book, but if the hero is trying to restore sanity or restore, goodness or restore whatever, the villain is sometimes more interesting to write. This is what Milton sort of thought of as what Lewis called about Milton, the Satan problem, right? Which is that Satan was more interesting to him than God. And that's absolutely true in the first few chapters. In the first few books of Paradise Lost, what got Milton out of it is the fact that Milton at a certain point realized that there's a fundamental pettiness and limited quality to Satan's evil. So that after a while, what passes for intelligence is actually just sort of throwing rocks from the sidelines. And Satan starts by thinking big and ends up incredibly small. And that's the way that a lot of evil turns out to be. It's fascinating at first, and then you see that it really boils down to very obvious kind of, concepts. And so that's one of the reasons that's how Milton got out of it. But for the rest of us, that's why I like to write morally gray characters that, or grayer characters that don't just think in these binaries. But yeah.
Brahms, Alrathian, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that, is mentioning that, the evil is a point of view. The villain may not think of that. It's not that they've sort of rolled off the evil overlord assembly line.
Right.
They have reasons for it. And they may think that what they are doing is the best thing.
Right. Yep.
The most, well, think about Thanos, right? In Avengers,
Sure.
Thanos thought he was doing this for the greater good.
Yeah.
Dragonsphere is pointing out Lord of the Rings, Sauron, right? Sauron's just a horrible villain because he's just this giant flaming eyeball hanging in the sky. Whereas Saruman, actually, you see, Saruman is, I think, the more interesting villain.
I
because
agree.
he was good and then kind of went bad.
I agree. And I think that's also kind of a misunderstanding people have about Tolkien's work in the sort of limited, because they make arguments about, it saw evil in one particular way. And this is the most nonsensical argument. Saruman is not the same evil as Sauron, is not the same evil as Gollum, is not the same evil as Shelob, is not the same evil as... all of these evils are as Wormtongue, these are all wildly different and often different from each other. Shelob doesn't care about the ring or about Saruman, and Saruman certainly has no interest in actually sharing power with Sauron once he gets the ring, and Sauron, so these are just wildly different visions of how evil should actually be played out. And so, in a way you could argue that Saruman is more of a kind of proximate evil than Sauron is, who's almost more like a force of nature. If you, look at the end of that book, why do we end with the Scouring of the Shire? We end it with going back and it's Saruman as the last person that we see. Such a gorgeous ending to that book, by the way, that's the thing they come back to. Anyway, this is Cat's class, not my class. You're going to get me all
I know we're about to like geek out and start citing
no, we're not going to do that. But, so all right, last chance chat, and then we will let Cat go on world building specifically if we have it. The last opportunity to get things
or
in.
love advice if you really feel the need for something. I'm happy to totally screw up your life in some way.
Yes and no, but I would point out, Erdinel, that Gollum does kill to get it. And one of the big reasons is that he kills, whereas Bilbo does not get the ring through killing. In fact, he specifically begins his possession of the ring with mercy. Gollum begins his possession of the ring with the murder of another. And so that has a profound effect, I think, on the way each of them are affected, which doesn't mean that he's not a pitiable figure and all that. He's a fascinating character, but he did, before the ring got to him, there was some fault lines there, I guess I would say. So,
but also notice with Gollum, one of the really interesting things about the end, and I hope we're not spoiling this for anyone, is that Frodo wavers, right? And Gollum's the one who ends up taking the ring into the volcano, into Mount Doom.
That's right.
Which he can only do because Bilbo and Frodo both were kind.
That's right. Because of mercy, and that's why Gandalf's line about even the wise cannot see all ends is so important. You have no idea the profound effect that has. And as much as everyone likes to talk about Sam and gets behind, Team Sam, and he's really the hero, Sam's provincialism in the way that he handles Gollum is almost disastrous. Sam's attitude towards Gollum is very different, and it's not until he bears the ring for a short period of time that he starts to understand a little bit of Gollum, and that's when he, too, shows mercy to Gollum in a way that he would not have had he not had the ring before. I warned you all I was going to do this. I'm not going to do it. God damn it. I'm not going to do it.
All right. So we will stop with the Tolkien trivia.
Yes, we will stop with the Tolkien trivia. This is fun stuff.
Are there other questions that people have about world building? But I also will say, if you have questions about character stuff that you want me to cover next time, I will invite you to go ahead and mail them to me in the intervening month. If you're like me, probably sooner rather than later. But you can mail them to catrambo@gmail.com, and I will make sure that I incorporate some answers in my notes if you have particularly burning character problems. And Kilobyte, you're going to message me on Discord with your idea. Anything else? Because otherwise, I might declare us over.
All right. Going once, going twice. My characters are doing.
Oh, no, that's just a comment. Oh, wait, question.
We do have one. We do have one. I think in Dragon, that'll be a good, nice segue to wrap up that one. That question.
So is it viable to write the myths of the story before writing a story? I think it is a great way to procrastinate. I will say, but writing the myths is writing stories.
Yes, exactly.
So if you write the myths, those might be sellable stories themselves. You don't know. So I would do that.
Remember, Dragon.
Yeah, don't do the language first. Don't follow Tolkien.
Yeah, don't be him. There's only so many, Oxford chair linguists that we can all be. I would point out, by the way, that Tolkien saw his history as the story. For him, Silmarillion was really the greatest of the stories. I disagreed with Professor Tolkien because I think Lord of the Rings is actually the greatest of the stories that he tells, but he believed that. So yeah. Cat, this was wonderful. What a wonderful premiere class to start out with. And I've been tweeting it out, and I hope people in chat recognize it's a real privilege to be able to have someone like this doing this for us on a monthly basis. I'm super grateful to her. And yes, please do go check out if you liked this. And I think this is interesting to everyone who is not just a writer, because that's, Cat and I can geek out on stuff like that, but also people who love game design and are interested in how game stuff is put together. Cat made a lot of game references today. Also, people who as readers like the, if you will, behind the scenes DVDs, like how do writers have those effects? How do they create those effects? And I loved that idea of the motion of verbs, the importance of motion, and the sense that we have of the physicality of the verbs, I think is really fascinating. And if I may, I would throw in one other person who is I keep wanting to say Lewis Carroll, and that's not what I said Lewis Carroll and then Lewis Clark. Hold on, I will find the name. My father, my poor father is rolling over in his grave because I'm not immediately remembering who wrote this. It is.
What's the book?
It's Lewis Thomas, The Lives of a Cell. If you want to see one of the people that I think is one of the best nonfiction writers ever, and someone who wrote exceptionally well doing exactly this, I would read Lewis Thomas. And The Lives of a Cell will give you a sense of exactly what Kat was talking about in terms of the use of verbs and precision of language. Now, he, of course, is not doing it with world building, but the precision of language and detail is exceptionally good. And so it takes something which might not seem as interesting and makes it extraordinarily interesting. So if you get a chance to see anything by Lewis Thomas, but The Lives of a Cell was his famous one. It's from 1974, and it's a collection of 29 essays, and it's just really, really, really well done, and sort of is an illustration of what Kat wanted to suggest. So good stuff. Yes, I like seeing how the sausage is made. So do I. But this is a great pleasure, Kat. Thank you so much. And definitely check out our classes. And besides this class, which they'll see you on again next month, where will the fine folks see you otherwise on the internet and elsewhere?
Well, next week I will be at the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America's Nebula Awards ceremony, and you will be able to follow all sorts of bits of that on Twitter. We'll also be live streaming the ceremony. I'm super excited because I get to meet William Gibson, which is very cool.
Nice.
And then after that, I will be at MosCon in Spokane, Idaho in a few weeks.
Oh, very cool. And of course, you will also see Kat here. I don't know. I think there's one that you won't be at, maybe.
You've scheduled. I will be the one on the 24th.
Right. So
I will not be on the one on the 17th.
That's right. So Kat will not be here for the 17th because she will be away at the aforementioned Nebulas, but she will be at our one on ArvCon. So she'll be here for our charity convention to benefit the Damon Rennie Cancer Research Foundation. So she'll be here for that, and that will be great, and all that kind of good stuff. So awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to let Kat go, and then I will close up shop with all of you folks. Kat, thank you so much again. Chat, can we get some love for Kat and the wonderful work today? And Kat, thank you again so much, and I'll be in touch about scheduling and all that soon.
That's perfect. Thank you guys so much. It's been a lot of fun. Do mail in questions if you have them. Otherwise, I am going to go maybe play a little Skyrim.
Nice stuff. Speaking of good world building, by the way. See you soon. Thanks, Kat, so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay, good stuff. So that was the first Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers on Twitch class on my Twitch channel, this one on world building. And I think that went beautifully, as I suspected it would. I was very, very excited to be able to have Cat with us. And and as I say, I am very excited to be able to bring her back for this in future, because I think this was a lot of fun. I'm just going to address my webcam so that we can do this. Lovely. There we go. Okay. So yes, that was the first one of those. Now, so thank you again to Kat for the awesomeness, and thank you all to chat for a very attentive and first one. And I hope you folks found it interesting. That's one of those things where, you know, as she said, sometimes you'll figure out later on and you'll be like, wow, that's really awesome what she just said, and I just realized the implications of blah 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 blah, you know, and that's all part of it, obviously. So that becomes a pretty cool thing. Okay, now a couple things that I want to note here. Oh, I'm glad, Alex452. Well, so there will be another class from Cat, which will be happening next month, and we don't yet have a date for it. It will be a Thursday. We don't yet have a set date for these, but that's going to be soon that will be happening. Oh my God, Kooky Canuck with a resub. Thank you so much, Kooky Canuck. I appreciate it, man. Thank you very, very much. Good to see you, sir. So I don't yet know exactly when that's going to be, except that it will be on a Thursday in June. So we will let you know as soon as we have that. But if you check out my Discord, !ArvCord, or if you check my calendar, which is on arvineleron.com, or !calendar on here, that will give you information about that as soon as we post it, which would be really cool. I also talk quite a bit about writing, although not in a formal capacity here, because I do that in my formal job that I teach in. But we talk quite a bit about writing. And so Kat is one person who's able to add to that mix now, which is really, really cool. Lessons on inconveniencing your characters. Yes, that's a good one. Okay, now I have a question, chat. Is there anyone here who has been subbed for 9 months? Like, of the people that are here, Kooky, Brahms, Nonstop, Kilobyte, Dragonspear, Erdanel, do we have any between 9 and 11 month subs here? Or is it all 6 months, or above 9 months, or Erdanel with the tier 2 sub? 8 months. 8 months. Okay. The reason I'm asking that is because we have a new thing, which I just uploaded, thanks to the power of Kilobyte. They have just opened up a new custom sub badge for 9 months. So we now have the base one, which is white, the 3-month one, which is yellow, the 6-month one, which is red, the 9-month one, which is and the year one, which is, of course, bronze. And then we have silver and gold for 2 and 3 year. But we now have a 9-month new sub badge, which people should check out, and that is with Mr. Kilobyte, who actually posted that. I was tweeting out Kat's class, I was running production here, and then I was also responding to him as I was doing that. And as soon as I'm done with you all, now I have to go pack for Three Rivers. But so we have a 9-month sub badge, which hopefully we'll be able to see when it goes live. The other one is, I don't think this is up yet, but okay, it's not. But we have a new emote, which I have just uploaded. It hasn't yet been accepted by Twitch, but I've just uploaded it. It is Arvany Witch. It's awesome. You guys are going to like this. I'm super excited about it. We finally got another one. So that is going to be at tier 1, there is an Arvany What? There's an Arvany Woe. There's an Arvany What? There is an Arvany Hype. And there's going to be an Arvany Witch as well. So we will have 4 of those tier 1 sub badges, tier 1 sub emotes. Tier 2 sub emote, which Ardenel just did, is going to be the Arvany Quill. So we're going to have that, which will be pretty sweet. And then the tier 3 sub emote, of course, is Arvany So Good. And that's there as well. Yes, those are the currently existing ones. Arvany Woe, Arvany What, and Arvany Woe, and Arvany Hype. But there's going to be an Arvany Witch, too, which is going to be really sweet. I cannot wait. And of course, the other thing is the announcement that I previously mentioned, which is going to be coming up on Saturday. So for those of you who missed this before, just to be clear, I wanted to mention this again. There is going to be no stream tomorrow, at least not an official stream tomorrow, because I'm going to be driving down to Pittsburgh for Three Rivers Comic Con. Little Larv will be going with me to that. And then on Saturday, I will be down at Three Rivers Comic Con, and Saturday evening at 8 p.m., I will be streaming live from Three Rivers Comic Con with the power of my portable rig, ArvBox 2.0, and I will have a big announcement. big announcement. And a couple of my questions might give you a clue about the nature of that announcement. You will not want to miss this, people. It is... I am excited. I am excited. Anyway, so you're definitely going to want to make that. That will be at 8 p.m. on Saturday evening, and then I will be back again, of course, on Tuesday at 12 noon for the Gamebook illustration stream with Terry Tunes. That, of course, will be Sherlock Holmes' Murder at the Diogenes Club. And then at 4 p.m. Eastern, I will be over at GOG, Com's Twitch channel for Pen and Pixels, episode 175, which will be D&D with GOG Storm King's Thunder, which is going to be super, super cool. And yeah, Arvini finger guns. It's Arvini Buddy Jesus. No, it is not those things. I should mention, actually, while I'm on the subject, I should just take a look at this quickly. And I think, first of all, I want to thank those of you who followed me on Twitter, because I'm up to a new record of 977. My goal for Twitter this year was to get to 1,000, and I'm only 23 followers away from getting to 1,000. And then my goal on here was to get to 80 subs. And right now I am at 70 subs. We're at 70 subs right now. So we are literally at the limit. We have never been higher than this number. So one more sub and we will break the record, and we will move into the 71 sub category, which would be pretty awesome. So my goal was to do that, was to pass 400. I think I said 400 for Patreon. I don't know if we're going to get there. Was to get to the 400 on Patreon, to get the 1,000 on Twitter, was to get to, I think my goal was to get to 750 YouTube subscribers. I'm like 704 right now, and then 71, and then to get to 80 subs. And again, these are all just, in a way, they're just numbers, so it's not like that big a deal. But these are all cool milestones that are sort of helpful to get a sense of how I'm able to build a community and all that sort of stuff. No, unsubbing and resubbing would not help, sadly. But I appreciate the follow on Twitter. Thank you, Alex, very much. And yes, if you like writing, there's a lot more where that came from. So that's all going to be good. Oh my God! You didn't need to do that. Oh my God, dude. I should not have done that with Aradinel in chat, because I should have realized Aradinel was going to be like, well, bam, here's a gift sub. Thank you, Aradinel. That's very kind of you. Thank you, thank you. And welcome, Second OBS, to the channel. 71 subs, officially a new record. Yay. Thank you, Aradinel. You're my hero. Thank you, thank you. That is very kind of you. Thank you, Aradinel. So we are at 71 subs, folks. We are at a new record. And also, these subs have really helped because they've opened up these new emote slots for us, which is why we have 4 emote slots that we're able to use and things like that. So thank you. That's awesome. I really appreciate that. Very kind of you. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, so that is going to do it for me for today. We are in good shape on stuff. I am very happy about that, and I cannot wait for Saturday to share some things with you. It's going to be good times. But I want to thank everybody for making this, again, an awesome stream. You guys were great, and I am looking forward to more awesomeness with you on Saturday at 8 p.m. You are not going to want to miss that. Remember that next Thursday, by the way, get used to being here on Thursdays, because next Thursday we have got Emberwind, which does not involve me. It involves John Helfers as GM, along with Marie Bilodeau, Brahms, who was in chat, Saad, and Jen Brozek. Those 4 players. They have also been having a great time, and they've been doing some really good RP themselves. So you'll definitely want to check that out. Emberwind from Nomnivore Games, which of course I do some writing for. They will be next Thursday, and then the Thursday after that. I want to thank them for being willing to move. Normally they would have been going tonight, but we moved it to accommodate Cat's class. Starting in June, we'll make sure the Cat is on a different Thursday, and so we will have a set kind of rhythm of, you know, when Cat plays and when Cat does her game. When Cat does her class and when they do their game. So we'll make sure that that all happens. So, but thank you everybody for being here. I hope you like what you saw and heard. Please make sure to follow the channel. Check out the YouTube with !ArvTube, Discord with !ArvCord. Please make sure to check out the Twitter with !ArvTweets, as many of you did today. Please spread the word about this as well. arvineleron.com, bookmark that site, because there's a calendar over there, plus a podcast and things like that. Counts as productive time because it's education. Yes, absolutely, Kit Falbo. Well, because it is something, I mean, listen, that hour and a half that we just spent was super productive. It was productive for me, because while I was tweeting this out, I was also like, oh, I'm going to write that note down and write that, like, you know, I've been writing for many years, but I mean, I learned a number of things just there from Cat's really informative class. So yes, absolutely, that is useful as well. Thank you, Raka. That's awesome, dude. I'm really, really grateful for you for doing that. That's really awesome, dude. So yes, so please make sure to check those out. On the Patreon side, that is !Arvtreon. That allows you to get inspirations. You can support me over there. You can also check out the shop, the merchandise area, the !Arv shop. There will be more merchandise up there soon, not just the Infinity and Beyond, but other stuff coming soon. And then last but certainly not least, we've got that sub button that all of you have been hitting tonight, which I really appreciate, which allows you to sub to the channel and get those awesome benefits as well. So that's the deal with that. We're not going to do a raid today, I don't think, because I'm not ready to do one. But we will, I'm going to head out now. I will see you folks, as I say, not Friday, but Saturday. So be ready for that. Oh, thank you, Kooky Canuck. I appreciate it. Well, good, because there may be more where that comes from. There are more books coming soon. My academic book, of course, which is already out, Tales and Tomes from the Forbidden Library, is going to be out by Gen Con. And other writing coming that I can't talk about quite yet. You just don't want to miss any announcements. That's all I'm going to say. But thank you, Cookie. I appreciate that very much. And thanks to everyone who made this an awesome stream tonight. Please spread the word. Let everybody know. And yeah, make sure that you're back here Saturday night, where we will hopefully have the emotes approved and the sub badges approved, and the big announcement, of course, that I'll be doing on Saturday evening. Also, if anyone is in the Pittsburgh area, would love to see any or all of you at Three Rivers Comic Con. I will be doing a talk on Saturday, and otherwise I will be there presenting, selling my wares and talking about my work to folks that stop by. So it's going to be a good time. But that's going to do it for me. Much love to everybody. You're all wonderful people. Thank you to my wonderful mods, Aridinel, Dragonspear. Thank you to my subscribers, Aridinel, Dragonspear, Nonstop, Kooky Canuck, Rock God, and Second OBS. And thank you to Aridinel for that gift of the sub to Second OBS. Second OBS, I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much to Alex452 for stopping on by and for following. I hope you like what you saw and heard and will return. Thank you to Apricot Droopfruit, to Brandhauser. Thank you so much to Cat Rambo. Cat, wonderful job. And you can see Cat on Espergenesis when you don't see her doing these classes. Thank you so much to Commander Root. Thank you to Determinologies, ECAG, Flak A Marauder. What's up, Flak? Thank you to Frosty Ray, to Jagtris, to Kit Falbo. Thank you to Lurks, Mubot, Mr. Mano, Nedved. Thank you to No Name Namer, One Crit Wonder TV. Thank you to Polizei, PKD Fan, Stately Stars. What a cool name, Stately Stars. Thank you to Stay Hydrated Bot for always keeping me hydrated. Thank you to you, Christensen. Thank you to VNK. And thank you to Virgo Praz. Thanks, everybody. Much love. And I will see all of you wonderful people Saturday night for the big announcement. Do not miss it. Until then, keep writing, and everyone be good to each other. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good night.
know you